I really can't decide. Is this show about true crime, or is this about people and social dynamics and learning how to like appropriately balance your empathy? I don't know. But every day that I do this show, it's a struggle. I think for me and for you, because there's just so much going on. Like, Jesus, the other week, the Cynthia Kaufman case, it's like, oh, this is so sad. Oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Wow, that's so sad. Oh, they did what? I mean, like that's really what I feel like happens every single episode. And today's case is on Taylor Schabusiness. I can't believe I have to say that. Not her real last name, but that's how a lot of people know her as. And what's terrifying about this case is not just the details of it, not just what Taylor did, because if you don't know, it's about to get really dark. But the scariest thing for me is, on Sinister, I'm always trying to dive in and figure out, okay, how did we get here? How did this happen? And I'll put most of my opinions at the end of the video, but I genuinely feel like the things that happened to Taylor leading up to her crime can happen to anybody. But don't forget, she did what she did. Look, before we roll into the episode, we have a sponsor. And it's a good sponsor, because I need you to stop putting off your doctor's appointments. I know, it's a nightmare. Going through your insurance, finding somebody that has good reviews, calling the front desk at the office, seeing what availability they have, somebody at the front desk being rude, you have phone anxiety, whatever it may be. It is hard to get a doctor's appointment. Like, why can't we just go online and click a few buttons and have the appointment booked? Oh my God, actually you can with ZocDoc. Oh my God, it's so funny that I'm filming this today because I have an appointment today that I set up with ZocDoc. I just got an email yesterday that was like, reminder, your ZocDoc appointment is tomorrow, Tuesday, July 2nd. I literally use ZocDoc, okay? Otherwise, I would never get into the doctor's office. I just wouldn't. And for me, it's timeliness, it's procrastination, it's all of that stuff. But now you can just get that set up so fast. Also, now that I'm getting older, I've really learned to appreciate the feeling after I go to a doctor's appointment. Like, oh my God, we got all of our tests done, we got our teeth cleaned, like whatever it may be, there's like a sense of relief once you finally do it. So look, if you need a specialist or a primary care physician that doesn't live 40 miles away, that has good reviews, has open availability, all you need to do is grab the ZocDoc app or do it on the browser. It's a free app where you can compare high quality in-network doctors that have availability for you, sometimes today, sometimes in the next 48 hours, but definitely a convenient way to book everything you need. So yes, I know I said it's free, but help us out. Go to ZocDoc.com/Sinister and you can download the app or book through the web today. That's ZocDoc.com/Sinister. Taylor has to be one of the most recent cases that we've covered. Also, one of the youngest people. I just find that so interesting. Like, I'm looking at the papers for it and it says Taylor was born in 1997. That was 2 seconds ago. At the time of her crime, she was only 25 years old. Think about how dumb you were at 25, okay? And like, if you're not quite 25 yet, just trust me, when you're 30, you're gonna be like, dude, I was so dumb. Oh, like, walk with me for a second. Think about how dumb you were at 17, if you're like 24, 25, right? Okay? She's 25 years old at the time of her crime. So young. Anyways, Taylor was born Taylor Coronado in 1997 in Chicago. She has a younger brother who was born just a couple years later in 2000, and her parents' names were Marla and Arturo. Now, they live in Chicago, like a little suburb outside. Everything's fine. And then at one point, when Taylor was in 4th grade, they decided that they were going to move to Wisconsin because her dad got a good job at Verizon. And I mean, like, look, this is not like a C-suite level position, but it's what he could get, and it paid enough that it was worth them relocating. Now, most of the accounts say that the family got along pretty well, like Taylor, her brother, her dad, her mom, everyone was together. But when you really dig into their history, and then also especially what her father did later, things were not okay in the home. Like, there's just no way. Like, I could not find any intricate research or details about what was going on in Taylor's life from, like, birth to 4th grade, other than the big move that they made. But if you listen to these details, you will know things were not okay in the home. Well, the first thing that happened was her mother was a severe alcoholic. A severe alcoholic. And by that, I mean, I think her mom was in her 40s, but there was one night where they all watched a movie as a family. You know, they're like kind of, you know, doing the picture perfect family thing, right? But they were all watching a movie. And then they went to bed that night. And Taylor's mom died in her sleep because her liver was failing. She was such a severe alcoholic that she had organ failure in her 40s. Also, let me be so clear. This says Marla died in 2009 from cirrhosis and alcoholism. She died in her sleep. She was 41 years old. I mean, think about how much of a hair that is from like 39. Y'all ain't never hear nobody dying of alcohol poisoning or alcohol liver failure in their 30s, right? This woman was a severe alcoholic, okay? Now, we've talked about a lot of cases where there's like alcoholic parent neglect. A lot of times it can be like in a single parent home or something. No, both of the parents were here and Marla was just drinking a whole lot. And we don't know what type of effect that had, but we have seen it in other cases where it came from a single parent home, and it's safe to say it's not good. But that's her mother, Marla. Wait until we get to her father, which I can't get to until we get to about 2010s or so. But once you get that, you're gonna be like, okay, got it. I've mentioned this before in past episodes, but grief is a monster. And not only that, it's a monster that we don't take very good care of in society because we all experience losing somebody that we're close to. We all have the same advice for each other. Well, it comes in waves. Here's the stages. Time heals all things. Blah, 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 blah. You know, that doesn't really work for everybody. If you're like a healthy person that's like, ooh, I'm going to move through this. I've got a support system. I'm going to go through all the phases and I'm going to find my way to the other side of grief. Sure, like that's so beautiful. But some people, they freeze. They just stop. It's like one of our most primitive forms of human protection to just play dead, literally emotionally, until the threat passes. And unfortunately, you know, with grief, the threat's not going to pass. It's always going to linger. So I'm not sure exactly how Taylor dealt with this at 11 and a half years old, abrupt, sudden, out of nowhere. But it could be somewhere between completely freezing and barely even feeling the first, you know, stages of grief, all the way to, no, she didn't deal with it in a healthy way. She didn't. Because the court documents that look into her past said that she was in and out of therapy. It's like they were trying to get some help for her, but it wasn't really working. And personally, I think part of the reason for this was, okay, I don't know if this is going to be as unbelievable to you guys as it is to me, all right? Now, reminder, we're going to get to what Taylor did. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But right now, in this moment, sure, 11-year-old girl. This 11-year-old child that was already dealing with a lot of stuff, had lost her mom, has a weird dad, and amongst other things, she goes to get help from mental health professionals at 11 and a half, 12 years old. And you know what they said her diagnosis was? Lord save me. Keep me from putting my opinions through the whole video. I'll put it at the end. I swear to God. They said that she needed to be medicated immediately for ADHD. That's what they said. Now, I will say this. I am not a psychologist, but I'm somebody that's lived through this personally, and I just know that this is true. This is just factual information. Trauma or PTSD can mimic some symptoms of ADHD, and then when those things go hand in hand, it's just really amplified. You can't focus, you can't think straight. Like, there's a lot of crossover between dissociative PTSD symptoms and low attention span of ADHD. So that's what they decided. They decided no trauma present, just neurodivergency, and she has ADHD. They not only medicated her for ADHD, giving her a stimulant, they then also put her on a mood stabilizer, an antidepressant, and an antipsychotic. She lost her mother. She went in for treatment, and they gave this 11-year-old girl all of these very, 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 very serious medications that are going to alter her brain for the rest of her life. Now, let's just be real. Mood stabilizers, antidepressants, antipsychotics, they have saved so many people. There's so many ailments and symptoms and everything that people need this stuff for. They, cycle through different type of medications trying to find the perfect one to make their life better. But it is a shocking red flag to me that she was put on all of these medications right after losing her mother. They did not cycle through to find the correct ones. They just said, here are your pills. Take all of these every single day. We're not going to talk about your mom. We're not going to talk about what else is happening in the home. You take this, and then you're going to feel better. Is that not horror movie to anybody else? I mean, really, truly, like whether you're like a kid that's in the system that says, okay, I should take this, or whether you're a parent that's like, trusting doctors and they're like, well, your kid needs this antipsychotic. They need this. And you're just like, okay, this is very scary to me. Like, are we going to loading up people with medication before their brains fully develop rather than maybe trying grief counseling first? Like, we know this happened. We know that her mother abruptly died. None of that. Take the pills. I said I was going to try to hold my opinions to the end, but it's wild to me. It's really, 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 really wild. And even though the information about her behavioral health and mental health come from the court documents that are on the defense side, basically the side that's trying to defend Taylor, it is wildly shocking to me that they were able to say that they did not rotate this medication for her on a regular basis, which if you guys know, if you take antidepressants or something, you try multiple ones to avoid side effects, the way the medications mix together. Like, this is a whole process. No, they gave her these specific prescriptions, never checked back in, just told her to keep refilling them. Am I crazy, or is that just wild? Taylor takes this medication from when she is 11 until she's 18 years old. 7 years. All of these. Antipsychotic, antidepressant, ADHD medication. It just over and over and over again. And then for some reason, she decides to wean herself off of the medication. She doesn't want to take it anymore. It's unclear whether she started to dabble in drugs or anything up into this point. But after she got off the medication, that's when she just really kind of hit the gas. Now, a lot of you guys know that if you just abruptly stop taking any type of medication, especially one that you've been taking for years and years and years, not only can there be side effects, but there can just be this abrupt switch flip. And you never know what it's going to look like. I mean, if you ask some people, they have some scary stories about like quitting antidepressants cold or something. And she was taking so many prescription medications. So she stops taking it when she's about 18. And, she ends up getting into this really big fight in school that gets her kicked out. And that's when she meets this guy named Warren Chabot. Now, as much as I tried, I just really, really, really wanted to get some clarity here. So when Taylor married Warren, she was to take his last name, but Warren had recently changed his name to Schabusiness. I could not get many details on this, and I'm like, is this name a joke? I do know that Warren and Taylor were very involved in taking drugs, and, maybe the Schabusiness thing, it's very methy. I don't know if this is like a meth joke, but what we do know is that while they were together, Warren changed his last name from Chabot to Schabusiness, and then Taylor in 2018 changed her last name to Schabusiness, but they didn't get married until 2020. They actually got married during the pandemic on Valentine's Day in 2020. Shockingly, they were together for quite a bit of time, like roughly about 2 years. But the thing that they had the most in common was drugs. They both just loved doing drugs, and Taylor's drug of choice was meth. Remember, her brain had been contained by these, antipsychotics and antidepressants for so many years. Like, even though these are prescription medications, it almost makes sense to me that she would go off and seek something highly mind-altering because she's not used to being in her own body at all. In fact, the girl has almost never been in her own brain and body. It's always been controlled by some sort of emotion or grief or substance. Now, Taylor starts to get really heavy into meth, and also a reminder, this is during the pandemic. I mean, not only was everybody off their rocker, but now she's supposed to stay locked up inside. And of course, she's just going to be doing drugs, right? With her husband that she's only known for 2 years. I mean, this is just an awful situation. Okay. Yes, there's other stuff that we'll get to that may or may not have like happened in her childhood or whatnot. But the series of events of a child abruptly losing their mother, going to seek help, getting put on a lot of medications and not getting any type of other support, and then not liking the way it makes you feel, so she gets off of the medications, but then also doesn't feel good in her own body, so she starts taking drugs. This is why I said this is so scary, because we go through so many cases on Sinister where there's this horrible, traumatic, like psychological parental abuse in some capacity, and like what happened to Taylor, I feel like could happen to so many people, probably is happening to so many people. But this is where we're going to start to get into Taylor's decisions, right? Because in Sinister, yes, we understand the human underneath it all, but there is a point where you're an adult and you're making choices, and a lot of Taylor's choices are horrifying. They're horrifying, right? So, reminder, let's turn our empathy cap down a little bit now because we're getting into the story. Do you hate when I remind you about that? Do you like it? I really don't know, but some of you don't need it. Some of you do need it, so I have to tell you. Also, I could be projecting because sometimes I need to turn down my empathy cap too, right? So Taylor's doing a lot of meth, and she's not like some mastermind meth dealer that's very secret and like, you know, knows how to do drugs. No, she like is literally, she's just, oh my God, she's just straight up druggy, okay? A police officer found her in June of 2020, just like walking around, knocking on people's doors. This is what I said. This is straight drug user behavior. The officer finds her just kind of like stumbling around, knocking on doors. And he's like, "Are you okay? Do you need any help?" And she said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm on a different plane right now. Actually, I just shot up." And she shows him, you know, the track marks on her arm and like, you know, keeps stumbling around. The track marks on her arm looked fresh. And when he tried to engage with her, she got very argumentative, wanted to get away from him. So much so that she started to run away and just blindly almost ran into traffic. And when the officer tried to grab her, she kicked him. So now the officer's got this woman who is clearly on something out of control, a danger to herself because she almost just ran into traffic stumbling around. And now she's assaulted him. So he arrested her. Honestly, probably best for Taylor. You know, if you're completely out of it telling police officers that you just did drugs and running into traffic, it is probably the best option at this point in time for you to be arrested and put somewhere safe. And that's exactly what they did. But Taylor was very angry about this arrest. She was very, very, she has you can really see it in her, and we'll see it through multiple moments of this case, but she has a lot of just repressed anger and hate. I genuinely think that something like happened to this person, and she has like this vitriolic hatred stored up in her body that manifests as just a gruesome violence. And I just find it hard to believe that we're born with that, but we'll continue. Of course, before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, one last ad. And look, it's for Lumi. A lot of you guys already know Lumi. You love Lumi. It's worked for you. It's worked for a friend. But some people still need to try. It's the best product you can use for all-day relief. No BO, no bad body smells, no nothing. It's a full-body deodorant. It's not just for your pits. It's for head to toe. And that's why people love Lumi. They can feel protected for hours and hours and hours on end, knowing that they smell fresh and clean. You know, smelling great is a form of confidence, okay? You guys know how good it feels when someone says, "Oh my God, you smell so good." Look, you're gonna get that with Lumi, not just because of the full body odor protection, but also because of all the great scents they have. Clean tangerine, lavender sage, toasted coconut. The best part is it has 72 hours of sweat and odor control. Look guys, you can't beat it, especially when we're gonna give you 15% off of all the products. Now look, there's a starter pack. It comes with a cream tube deodorant, a solid stick deodorant, and then 2 other products of your choice. Isn't that fun? Or is that just me? I love putting together a little starter kit. I think that's so cute. And now, if you're a first-time customer, you can get 15% off of the products. All you gotta do is go to lumideodorant.com, and then after you put all the items in your cart, use the code SINISTER as checkout. You're gonna get 15% off of your first purchase. Once again, guys, that's LUMEDEODORANT.com, and use Sinister at checkout. So that's the first time that Taylor gets arrested during the pandemic. And then she gets arrested again during the pandemic, which, raise your hand if you did not get arrested during the pandemic. I was at home and I was afraid to leave the house, okay? I thought that we were all chilling or we were depressed. No, Taylor was having a high-speed police chase while on meth. I just want to take a moment to say this. No matter what you're going through, try to stay away from drugs, okay? It provides some kind of temporary relief, it seems like, for people when, you're dealing with a lot of mental stress, and then you get to just push a button and go somewhere else, right? That's textbook addiction. I don't know. I guess I just want to put a little PSA out there, a little reminder, because, we don't run the DARE program anymore. As much as TikTok or certain songs or movies like to glamorize drug use in some capacity, if you're dealing with a lot of unprocessed trauma, you should not do drugs, and you certainly should not do meth, okay? So she's on this high-speed chase. They catch up with her in a parking lot, and of course, she's on meth, and there's meth in the car, and there's a tourniquet for using meth, and needle, and just everything. She was just a textbook drug addict. It was also very young, and so there was it was just a mess. It was just a mess, okay? So she's already on bail probation when this happens, so she gets another charge. This time it's for eluding an officer, breaking probation, and the possession of drug paraphernalia. She just got 3 months in jail and about 2 years of probation. Things are already going downhill for Taylor, but to make matters worse, now, remember, Taylor, human, and we're going downhill, right? I know this is probably going to upset some people because it sure upsets me. She then had a child. She and Warren had a baby. And that baby actually just went off to go live with, I believe, Warren's grandparents, the paternal grandparents. I did not think that Taylor was sober for those 9 months. I think she was doing meth while she was pregnant. I think she was doing lots of drugs while she was pregnant. One of the reporting officers that was in the police chase that happened a few months prior, they specifically wrote, the driver of the car was still continuing their driving behavior at a high rate of speed despite the chase, swerving all over the lanes and not caring for any other drivers except themselves. I don't think that Taylor cared about her baby when she had it. I think that she was doing drugs while she carried to term, and then they shipped the child off to go live with Warren's grandparents, where we don't have many other details, and hopefully it was a healthy baby, right? That's the most that we can hope for. But Taylor gets arrested the second time, and then she has a child. So on top of everything that she's dealing with, another one hits, the big one. You guys know this. You might know the Andrea Yates case. Oh, it's a big one. The postpartum depression. Just because Taylor is doing a bunch of drugs and she's going down the dark path of being a bad person doesn't mean that she's immune to postpartum depression. And it hits her hard. It hits her so hard that she decides she doesn't want to be here anymore, and she tries to do something about that. This lands her another visit in the mental hospital, where they're trying to assess, why did you try to not be here? And this is where she is finally diagnosed with PTSD. I really hope that we can start to break the stigma soon that children can have PTSD. I bet you there's a lot of people that are listening that know for a fact that their biggest traumas, whether it's like complex PTSD or major event PTSD, probably happened at some point in their childhood. That's how it was for me. All of the worst things that I feel like have ever happened to me was prior to when I was 15. And, part of this is that we're so young, and if we don't have the support system of a family member or a parent or something, and we don't know enough about the world, when these bad things happen, they're so amplified because we're like, why did this happen? And you're shocked, you're stressed, you feel all this, and then you have no support system. And then, we get older, we're in our 20s, and yeah, a lot of really bad stuff happens, but sometimes we have better resources, so it's not as traumatizing as it is when we're kids. But it is just, I don't know. I know that we tend to save PTSD as a diagnosis for like war veterans, but I mean, I really wish that I had gotten diagnosed before I was 29. Sorry, getting a little personal here. My life would have been so much easier if I had known that I had PTSD when I was a child to early teenager versus being undiagnosed for 15 years. What a wild disservice to us, right? Anyways, children can have trauma. Taylor finally gets her diagnosis of PTSD in May of 2021. And also a lot of times when people do finally get their PTSD diagnosis, they don't always necessarily believe it because every single bad thing that's ever happened to them in their life has been minimized. So they just don't believe that they're worthy of like sympathy or that something bad has happened. So sometimes they get the diagnosis and they don't even do anything. They're like, okay, whatever. But she finally gets it. They say, you do have ADHD, but you also have PTSD from your childhood and, things that have happened all the way up until this point. Sit here in the hospital for a couple days and then we'll have you on your merry way. And, that's what happens. Now, keep in mind, isn't it terrifying how recent this entire case was? We're in 2022 when this happened. 2022. But 2022 is also the year that Taylor Schabusiness would meet a new guy, and his name was Shad Thyrion. Shad was honestly like a pretty normal guy. He grew up in Wisconsin. He had siblings. He grew up with both of his parents, and he looked like a pretty normal guy, honestly. But, Shad had a dark side. He was into drugs. He liked doing any type of drugs. Now, even though he has the picture perfect home, which for me, anytime I see two parents and siblings, I'm like, yay, picture perfect. But we know that's not all picture perfect, right? But even though he had what seemed like a fairly put together life, something probably happened to him too, because he connected with Taylor, another very, very traumatized person, and they both wanted to do drugs together to escape. Right? But, outside of the drugs, he went to high school. He was known for playing video games. He liked sports. He liked camping. He was also very into woodworking and listening to music, making some music. It was these are just such yep, there's Shad, normal guy. Now, some sources say that Shad and Taylor met through Bayport High. And then some sources say that they met through a mutual friend. So it's, a little split. But regardless, they met when they were in their early 20s and they connected really, really quickly. And they meet and it's really just about doing drugs. But, Shad's got a little crush. He thinks that Taylor is pretty and he likes hanging out with her. And so they start hooking up. But Taylor is into some kind of rough stuff, She's into BDSM and strangulation, and Shad's like, oh yeah, okay, I could get down with this. And what's interesting is usually it's Taylor that's doing the strangulation. She enjoys that. She would even bring stuff over. They were literal dog collars and dog chains. And so she was using these chains or using her hands and things. And she was choking him and she liked it. And now I don't know if Shad just really liked this girl or thought she was pretty or if he was, down too, but that is what their relationship was. Now, it's unclear how long Taylor and Shad had been hooking up, but it's presumed to be a very, very short period of time. Like, this is not something that was going on for like weeks and there was like some intimacy building. Like, it was just, dude, it was really just like a meth hookup, okay? On February 23rd, they go and do meth again, and they decide to go back to Shad's mom's house and hook up in the basement. So on this night, Shad's mom is home, and she sees Taylor and Shad come in, and they just go straight down to the basement. And this is pretty normal. And they stayed there all day long. But it wasn't until about like 2:30 in the morning when Shad's mom heard the basement door slam really, really loud, like abnormally loud. And then she heard Taylor's car start up, her van outside, and pull out. So the mom kind of wakes up and is just wondering if Shad is still downstairs or if he had left to go somewhere with Taylor. And she goes into the room, and it's dark, but she flips on the light and sees, this is so horrifying, a bucket with a towel over it. And underneath the towel was Shad's decapitated head. She called the police, of course. And when they arrived and they looked in and they saw the bucket, there was not only a completely severed head of her son, but there was flesh and genitals all inside of this bucket. There was also blood everywhere, other mounds of body parts and flesh throughout the room. And the one person that anybody is looking for is Taylor Schabusiness. Now, the other thing that's so disturbing about this is that Shad's body had lots of just cuts to the side. His internal organs had been removed and displaced throughout the room, but the only weapons that the officers could find were a carving knife and a butter knife. He had been dismembered with a carving knife and a butter knife. Taylor was not far away. She was at a nearby apartment complex. They knew exactly who they were looking for. And surprise, surprise, not only did they find her, but they found her with blood on her shirt and on her hands. Literally. She was brought into the Green Bay Police Department where she was questioned about what they found. And when they told her what all was in the room, which you just heard a minute ago, her response to that was, "That's pretty fucked up." That's what she actually said to the officers after she heard everything. She actually did admit to the crime, but she said, I was just so messed up off of meth. I just kind of like blacked out. The video of her interrogation is online, and if you're curious about this case or just more about her demeanor of like what all is going on, we'll put a link in the description, but I definitely recommend watching it for like 5 or 10 minutes because you'll see Taylor's behavior is just very strange. It is like that of someone who has been on drugs her entire life. Sometimes we see people and their emotions are very like trauma-based, or it's very manipulative, or it's sensitive. There's some kind of like human thread, human connection there. With Taylor, she seems like her brain has been destroyed by prescription and non-prescription drugs. Truly. And that's why I said this case is so horrifying. She never got any help. She was a girl that lost her mom that never got any help. And they were like, you have ADHD. But also empathy cap all the way down, because let me tell you a little bit more. She was very honest with the officers about what happened in this interrogation. She told them that they were hooking up and she was strangling him. And while she held him close, she could feel his heartbeat. And while she's on meth, she said that she just wanted to keep going until she didn't feel his heartbeat anymore. She actually said to the officers, I don't know, this is just how I am. Have you ever like loved something so much that like you just wanted to kill it? I don't know. That's just like how I feel sometimes. That's what was playing in her mind. When you love something, it's gonna die, right? So to me, this is like very trauma-based, and then like boom, drugs, right? Oh my God, like the drugs. She strangles him for 3 to 5 minutes. This guy that just honestly really likes this girl, and she doesn't let go. She keeps going. She said that he wouldn't die, but she just kept pulling. When he finally died, not just passed out, he had been asphyxiated. He was dead. It's hard to go into details about what she did next. I don't want to sugarcoat it for the YouTube algorithm or anything, because also I think it's such a dishonor to what she did, right? It becomes very minimizing. After she killed him, she started to play with his body and then also sexually assault him. She performed oral on him after he was dead. She took a dildo and sodomized him afterwards, all while taking a knife and cutting his body, cutting his flesh. I mean, this is just like really sick, okay? This is so sick. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna say it. I don't care what happens to this video. You're here, you're seeing it, right? Because let's just be real. Like, we went from poor girl that lost her mom to dead body rapist. That is what she is. She is a mutilator and she is a dead body rapist. That's what she is, okay? She told the officers, and I quote, she said, "I just kept sucking and cutting." She's fucking sick! The girl is sick. We've lost her. Goodbye. Okay. Empathy cat down. Empathy cat on the floor. Stomp it out. Okay. Like, this is crazy. Why do I do this show, dude? Why do I do this show? Like, why can't I just, like, you know, some days I'm like, BOZE, why don't we just do the research and, like, not try to figure out what happened to people? Let's just stick to I can't help it. Okay. That's why I do this. And it gives me so many emotions. Okay. She's a sick person. She's a sick person, okay? We combine normal things that can happen to people and then not the prescription drugs, but the meth, okay? If you have been through severe trauma, don't do drugs. Don't do drugs at all. Really don't do it if you've been through some messed up stuff that you can't rationalize, because you're gonna go off the deep end, okay? You are not in control with these drugs, and they're just going to make you sicker and sicker and sicker. So the investigators noticed that Taylor's not denying anything. And so they asked her, how did you feel about it? Did you like it? And she said, yeah, I liked it. DBR, okay? Sick woman. So of course, she gets 1st-degree intentional homicide, 3rd-degree sexual assault, and a charge for mutilating a body. Honestly, I'm like, can we add some more charges in? Because this is sick. There has to be more. Give us more. So Taylor's in jail where she belongs. I mean, this is really somebody, to me, that is a danger to society, okay? Textbook. Rehabilitation chances feeling really low. But she still has to go to court. And, you know, there's one day where she's in court and her attorney tries to dismiss one of the motions, and she just attacks them. The attorney asked the judge for a motion to deny the trial. Like, that's it. Man's just doing his job. And Taylor just straight up attacked him. Just jumped on him in the courtroom. There's a video of it. So anyways, the trial proceeds. And of course, her team wants to prove that she was mentally unwell. They're actually trying to say that she's not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, there was some expert testimony that said Taylor was clearly suffering from something. But I just want to remind you guys that, you know, in the courtroom, there are these experts that are hired on, from psychologists to journalists to like whatever. And they are paid to join the team of the defense or the prosecution and basically say what the defense or the prosecution want them to say. But sometimes they have very compelling arguments or very compelling evidence. So, you know, even though there's like a video where there's this lady is saying like, I do believe that she shows these signs of like X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's part of her job, right? But you and I can listen to Taylor's backstory and tell like, okay, she was not okay. But do we get to consciously take drugs, you know, throughout our early life and our pregnancy and throughout our friendships and then kill our friends? Like, you know, I leave the ball in your court. Also, I ask you, do you want Taylor Schabusiness just walking around in broad daylight? Like I said, ball's in your court. Now, over 28 people testified in court, and one of those people was Arturo, Taylor Schabusiness's dad. And he said that Taylor was not well. after her mother passed away. He also tried to argue that her brother's recent death had something to do with how she was feeling, but her brother passed away abruptly as well in a motorcycle accident in July of 2022, but Taylor committed her crime in February of 2022. Her dad, Arturo, also blamed Warren, the first husband, for Taylor getting addicted to drugs. He said in court, "The kid was already doing that shit before and was just an effing loser, and he got my daughter involved in that." But but Arturo is not just a concerned father. Arturo is also a piece of shit. And not only was he accused and charged of sexually assaulting a minor, but he was also convicted, and he's been serving years in jail. He got sentenced to over a decade in jail for raping a minor. Now, the child was actually his new wife's relative. It was just a girl that thought she was safe with her family. So, I ask you this. I always thought that it was strange from the beginning that, Arturo was just like, yeah, give my daughter whatever medications. But, if something else happened in the home, it kind of makes sense to me why he would sign her up for that and just be like, here, take this. You're the problem. Bye. I don't want to speculate too much because we want to keep it to the research, but the space between my ears is not empty, and that doesn't strike me as a first-time offender. The testimonies didn't help much. Most of Taylor's friends that could attest to her character were drug users or in jail themselves or convicted of child abuse. So, of course, the jury came back with a unanimous decision of guilty on all charges. First-degree intentional homicide, third-degree sexual abuse, and mutilating a corpse. The jury also found that though she may have been on drugs, she was of sound mind when she murdered Shad. On this day, Taylor was considered to be so violent that they had her wearing a spit hood when she came into the room. She is an extremely violent person. The judge did not hesitate to sentence her to life in prison, keeping her away from all of us. Now, look, for the end of this, I said I was going to throw my opinions at the end, and I'm so sorry. I sprinkled them through the case. I will try to do a little bit better about that in the future. But look, let me ask you these questions, okay? One, how do you feel about how much medication she was given at such a young age to deal with grief, right? I'm curious because some people might have a different point of view, and you guys know your different point of views are always welcome. Anybody having a different opinion than me, oh my God, I welcome it because I always encourage individuality. I don't want you just watching me on a computer screen and like what I say is law. Like, dude, screw that. Give me your thoughts. I always love to have them. I also wonder, how much of this do you think was exacerbated by drugs? I do not think that Taylor would have gotten to this point if she was not on meth.